英国导演克里斯托弗·诺兰做客可凡倾听，细数诺兰电影的技术原则，你能感受到他的用心良苦吗？
The matchup between computer graphics and the feeling of those with the material that you photograph in that era, it's a bad match. It doesn't blend very well. So what we wanted to do was really try and get real boats, real planes, and shoot as much as possible on camera.
从挑选演员到把控表演，他有何个人心得？
I love working with smart actors. I love working with actors like Christian.
是怎样的年少时光影响了他日后独特的创作灵感？
Those images, we hold them almost as precious as our own memories. They are part of us. They're like dreams and memories combined in some interesting way.
本期可凡倾听，海陆空三线开战，让我们走进诺兰的世界。克里斯托弗·诺兰，英国导演，当今好莱坞最炙手可热的导演之一。他曾执导《盗梦空间》《星际穿越》《蝙蝠侠：黑暗骑士》3部曲、《致命魔术》等口碑爆棚的电影，几乎所有作品都取得了艺术和商业的双重成功。《蝙蝠侠：黑暗骑士》更是首部全球票房破10亿美元的超级英雄电影。诺兰电影有着强烈的个人风格，他善用创新的叙事方式来讲述故事，观众看他的电影既觉得烧脑，又总能在恰当的时候获得解谜的乐趣。从1996年他拍摄个人首部故事片《追随》开始，到2017年的最新力作《敦刻尔克》，20年时光，10部影片都赢得了良好的口碑和票房。诺兰究竟有何独特的电影法则？诺兰电影法则2：最大限度实拍，尽量避免使用数字效果和动画特效。在电脑特效无所不能的时代，诺兰坚持尽一切可能捕捉实景，减少特效使用。敦刻尔克的片场如同真实战场，喷火式战机呼啸掠过，上千名群演同场出镜，60多艘舰船严阵以待。绑在机翼上的 IMAX 摄影机随着战斗机在英吉利海峡上空翻腾俯冲，拍下最逼真的战争画面，甚至坠机的场景也完全实拍。
As we know, CG effects can achieve everything we can, but you still insist on real shot. So to reproduce the event, you use many real warships and airplanes. How did you make sure of the historical accuracy of these huge vehicles, and how did you guarantee the safety of these antique airplanes during filming?
Well, the great thing with the airplanes, as far as the Spitfires go, they're very well looked after, and there are quite a few still flying because they're such a revered machine in British history. There are quite a few still flying, and the gentleman who did our flying for us is a guy named Dan Friedkin, who's an American who owns 6 of them and keeps them in amazing shape and has spare engines and reconditioned engines, and so they're very well looked after and they're very capable machines, and they're flown a lot. And so we were able to bring the pilots on and find out from them what was safe to achieve, what could be done in camera, and then how we could fake that up. And so, for example, one of the things we did is we bought a Romanian plane, a newer plane, a Russian, Soviet era plane called a Yak, that's a similar size and shape to a Spitfire, but much less valuable. And one that we could own, we could buy it ourselves, and we could drill holes into, so we could put camera mounts on that, which we could not do with a real Spitfire. And so we could fake up a cockpit of a Spitfire that we could put the actor into and actually have that flying in the air and fly it in formation with real Spitfires. And so we would get a shot of the actor, really up in the air flying the plane or appearing to fly the plane with real Spitfires in the background. To me, the choice you make, if you do these things CG, you can make the machine, so for example, the Messerschmitt 109, the enemy airplane that these Spitfires are fighting. In CG, you could make a perfect reproduction of a 109. What we chose to do is use a Spanish Bouchon, which is based on the same airframe. It's a very similar looking plane, and it's a real plane, so there are differences, and so experts will be able to tell the differences. And we took certain liberties, like the nose is painted yellow. In reality, they painted them yellow about a month after Dunkirk. But we chose to try and help the audience understand which plane is which, and those are the choices you make creatively to try and bring the audience along in the experience of the story and really get them to understand it. If you go the CG route, you can make something that's sort of perfectly accurate in terms of its historical authenticity if you want to, but it will feel like an animation. And particularly with World War II material, historical material, I think for me, the matchup between computer graphics and the feeling of those with the material that you photograph in that era, it's a bad match. It doesn't blend very well. So what we wanted to do was really try and get real boats, real planes, and shoot as much as possible in camera.
诺兰电影法则3：用胶片拍摄真实的世界，并且只用一台摄影机。诺兰坚持最大限度的实拍，用什么介质拍也极有原则。在电影界，他可是出了名的胶片电影爱好者，甚至在大大小小的采访中，他也时常提到胶片拍摄的优势。在他看来，胶片成像的颗粒感有着数字影像无法复制的独特魅力。同时，诺兰尽可能避免多机位，他喜欢只用一台摄影机高效率的拍摄。
Because of your persistence of shooting movie on film, so you are now as one of the conservatives in movie industry. What do you think about that?
I think I'm fine with that. I think that in technical terms, I think filmmaking has this incredibly rich history that has to be respected and built upon. And I'm all in favor of innovation, and I avail myself of all of the latest techniques. But when it comes to photography, there simply is no better way to film an image than using celluloid.
Film is an analog format with a random grain structure. Its resolution is analog, and so you can't even really put a number on it, 4K, 6K, 8K, I don't know. It has higher resolution than digital formats, and the color reproduction is analog color. So it's not 10-bit color or 12-bit color. It's unlimited shades of the different colors of the spectrum. So for me, film is a much better analogy for the way the eye sees the world. And if you're trying to make a film that looks realistic, that's the format to use because it's the closest to the way your eye sees. If you're doing something where you want a heightened look, particularly colorful or digital look, or like an animated film, or whatever, digital formats work very well. But if you want a realistic look, I think film is definitely the closest to the way the eye sees the world.
Why do you like to use one camera for shooting dramatic scenes? So how do you manage post-production with single camera scenes?
Well, I like to shoot single camera because what I've found is when you shoot multi-camera, you tend to have to compromise both angles. So you sort of wind up putting in the second camera someplace you're not quite happy to have it. The audience can only see one image at a time. And so as a director, I want to be able to plan one image at a time. And when you shoot multi-camera, you can only really watch, even if you have two monitors, you're looking at one and then you look at the other and you're editing. So really for me, I have found that the multi-camera approach doesn't necessarily save much time. So we really only use multi-camera for unrepeatable things, like stunts, or when we're blowing something up, we'll use lots of cameras, 4 or 5 cameras. But for regular dramatic scenes, I like to be able to watch the one angle to know exactly what I'm getting, shoot the wide shot, give the actors time to warm up in the wide shot, come in for their close-ups, and change direction as you go. If you shoot the same performance with 2 cameras, it's the same performance. So you're giving yourself different framings, but you're not really giving yourself different performance options. Whereas if you shoot 2 different angles, you shoot the loose shot one performance, and then you have the actor do it again with the camera in a different place, the energy of the performer is different. And a great film actor, and I learned this first from Al Pacino, who I think is one of the greatest film actors ever, they find a way to channel their energy to the camera. And so when the camera's in a different place, it's a different energy, and it's different to the shot, and it's a different thing than having two cameras running at the same time.
诺兰电影法则4：充分利用优秀演员的聪明才智。在克里斯托弗·诺兰的每一部电影中，他所追求的真实感同样适用于他对演员的选择。在诺兰的电影里，出场次数最多的要数迈克尔·凯恩。虽然老爷子演的都是配角，但每次的表演都不亚于主角。除此之外，诸如克里斯蒂安·贝尔、西里安·墨菲、马修·麦康纳、莱昂纳多·迪卡普里奥、汤姆·哈迪、玛丽昂·戈迪亚等等。诺兰善于利用优秀演员的聪明才智，更是喜欢用老熟人。
I always look to work with people who are, first and foremost, very talented actors, but really it's about personality. It's about finding great collaborators. Because I don't look at the actors as people come along and say the lines every week. I look for actors who are going to contribute something to fleshing out the character. They're going to be creative collaborators.
Chris can do everything. You know, he can. Gosh, I mean, look, he folded Paris in half. Like, you know, he can blow your mind visually. I love what his films are about, but then he'll turn around and he'll be able to direct really intimate performances in his films.
You have worked with a lot of famous actors and actresses, such as Christian Bale, Matthew DiCaprio. What was like working these superstars?
I love working with, every director loves to work with great actors, and I've been fortunate to work with some very great ones. But more than that, I love working with smart actors. I love working with actors like Christian and many others that I've worked with, like Leo, who they don't just look at their lines in the script. They look at the story, they look at what the film is trying to accomplish, and they become a partner, they become a creative ally in what's the best way to make that happen, what's the best way to get that across to the audience. And so every big star that I've worked with, every great actor I've worked with, it's been different, and we've had a different relationship and we've gone about it in a different way. But the thing that's been common to all of those working relationships is I avail myself of the intelligence of the actor. I look to them to come to work every day and have a different read on what we have to achieve in the scene. Because I'll be there on set worrying about, okay, these explosions have to go off and we have to shoot them before lunch because that's our permit, and the sun's going to go down behind that hill by a certain time and I need this shot and that shot. So if the star can turn up and have his eye or her eye on the narrative demands of the scene from a character's point of view, you know, how that can work, it's extraordinarily important. And all of these stars I've worked with, from, you know, we talked about Christian, but, you know, Anne Hathaway or Marion Cotillard or Tom Hardy or Cillian Murphy. I mean, these are actors of tremendous intelligence. And on this film, I got to work with, you know, two of my heroes who I'd always wanted to work with, Kenneth Branagh and Mark Rylance, who they're just incredible British actors with a remarkable sense of narrative context, of drama. You know, they're both writers and directors themselves. You know, Ken is a film director, so he's very, very understanding of my process and how he could help that. That's when you get to look good as a director, because you've got people around you who are making the film more than it ever could be if it were just you trying to figure these things out.
There are many experienced actors in Dunkirk, but this film also cast about 20 young actors, such as Harry Styles, a singer from One Direction. So what's your evaluation of Harry's performance?
Well, Harry auditioned for the role like all the other young actors, and because we were looking for these fresh faces, we were looking for people the real age of young soldiers, we'd opened it up as an open casting call. So we were talking to people in drama schools, we were talking to people who didn't have agents yet. You know, it was a very old-fashioned process of casting, and it was a lot of fun. Harry put his name into the mix and came to the auditions, and over a series of auditions over days and days, where we tried, you know, different young actors playing the different roles, and we would swap parts, try different groupings. You know, Harry did a terrific job in the auditions and earned his seat at the table.
I'm incredibly thrilled to have been involved in it. I'm a massive fan of Chris's, and I think when I first heard about him doing this story, I was kind of excited to watch it from the get-go, really. So I think being involved in it, I just feel very lucky to have been able to work with such an amazing group of actors, an amazing crew, one of the best crews I've ever worked with, and obviously Chris is amazing. So it's been a lot of fun. I feel very fortunate.
And I always felt very confident that he was going to give, you know, a great performance. It's really exciting now the film is finished. I get to show it to people and they get to see what he can do, because he has a very difficult role in the film, and it's not flashy, and he does it in a very subtle way, but it's very human, it's very real and truthful. And to me, the best thing you can say about an actor or performance is that it's truthful.
可凡倾听下节预告，究竟是怎样的原因让他无视火爆的3D 影像技术？
When you put 3D glasses on, because of the stereoscopic illusion, your brain makes the image smaller. So it's more intimate, it's small. And I prefer the big image. I prefer that feeling of being overwhelmed by the scale of the movie.
又是怎样的年少时光激发了他日后独特的创作灵感？
7 or 8 years old. And, you know, I would use my dad's Super 8 film camera and make little films.
广告很短，马上回来。诺兰电影法则5：我目前的电影并不适合使用3D 技术。2012年，对于为蝙蝠侠：黑暗骑士崛起投资2.5亿美元的华纳兄弟公司来说，如果诺兰同意他们用3D 方式拍摄的建议，那绝对是件大快人心的事情。无奈诺兰执拗得很，在他的坚持之下，蝙蝠侠：黑暗骑士崛起终究没用3D 拍摄而成。而之后的星际穿越、敦刻尔克，我们也都未曾看到3D 技术。
Now, what do you think of 2D and 3D? Are you going to try a 3D film?
I don't really like 3D for the type of films that I make. I think it's an interesting tool, but what I love about IMAX, what I love about giant screen formats, is when you have a huge screen, it feels larger than life. And so there's a heightened reality, and so you achieve that immersion in a very interesting way. When you put 3D glasses on, because of the stereoscopic illusion, your brain makes the image smaller. So it's more intimate, it's small. And I prefer the big image. I prefer that feeling of being overwhelmed by the scale of the movie. It's for me, it speaks to the movies I loved growing up, like, you know, Star Wars or 2001 or Lawrence of Arabia, these incredible films that give you these massive landscapes. I like that form of immersion more than the 3D form of immersion where everything is intimate and scales down.
随着电影《敦刻尔克》在中国热映，诺兰的目标是将这一历史性时刻转化为使观众身临其境的电影，而不是制作一部战争片。这一不同寻常的真实故事为诺兰提供了灵感，也包括肩上巨大的责任感。
I think Dunkirk is the first time for you to direct World War II films. So, what make you very deep impressed when you make these films?
I think, you know, working for the first time from a real historical event, I was very struck by the sense of responsibility that came with that. This is a real thing that happened, and real people were involved. And I had the honor and the privilege of meeting veterans, survivors who'd actually lived through these events. There are not many of them left now, and they're in their late 90s. Some of the people that I spoke to have already passed on. To hear their stories directly, to actually be able to sit there and speak to them, it was very moving. And it gave me a tremendous sense of responsibility that we have to tell their story right, and we have to find a way to be truthful to their experiences. And that's not something I've ever had to deal with before. But it also felt like a great opportunity for a filmmaker. It felt like a great privilege to be able to look at this incredible event that these people really went through and use that as the basis for an experience for the audience in a cinema.
You're very good at telling stories. So where does your inspiration come from?
I think with every film, inspiration comes from different places. I find it very difficult to decide on a project. I never quite know what I'm looking for. I think ultimately for me, it's about a compelling story, but also an emotional connection. And that can come from any number of different places. Once I get hooked by the story and by the emotion of it, then the inspiration becomes technical. Then it becomes this great game of how are we going to make this work? How do we solve this puzzle? How do we make it all fit together? And that's tremendous fun. But in order to get to that stage, there has to be that hook, that thing. You want to make a film because you desperately want to see that film. That's really the inspiration. Certainly for me, as a kid, films were very important. I loved going to the cinema. And I started making films when I was very young, 7 or 8 years old. And I would use my dad's Super 8 film camera and make little films. And so filmmaking is something I've always done. It's always been very important to me. And the films I've watched have been very important to me. And I'm fascinated by the way that the great films that we grow up loving, those images, we hold them almost as precious as our own memories. They are part of us. They're like dreams and memories combined in some interesting way. And so I think your highest aspiration, or mine as a filmmaker, is to try and create some images somewhere along the way that stick with people the way those images have stuck with me.
Okay, thank you very much, Christopher.
Thank you.
走进经典艺术人文频道。